our prayer, O God.
Let us be safe under the shelter of your protective wing.
Make us whole, we pray.
For you alone, God, our souls wait, and our lives are spent in service.
Hear our longing, O God. And let us continue in prayer. O God, we are a wayward people. Too often we hear your call only to ignore it. We take perverse pleasure in destroying what you have created. We seek our selfish interests, personal pleasure, and short-term gains. We become enslaved by our desire for security. Forgive our lack of vision. Take away our stubbornness and our greed. Lead us in more ways, we pray, for your sake. Amen. And please be seated. So good morning. It's good to see you this morning, and for many of us, we were here yesterday remembering our dear friend, Dr. Frank Spencer, whose funeral was beautifully attended by the NYU community and church and friends of the family. So thank you to everyone who made it extra special. Scott Dieter and Ron Caton were honorary pallbearers. Ron, thank you for wearing your uniform yesterday too, in honor of all that Dr. Spencer did during the Korean War to help the soldiers. We thank Michael Hilkhauser, who videoed from the balcony so that this moment was captured, so that those who were not able to be there will have a chance to hear the stories and sharing. It was really profound. And I thank, of course, our nurture committee and our hospitality coordinator for all that they did in the lovely reception, and everyone who brought food or beverages to add. It was a good time of really sharing afterward too. So, and gosh, and Clayton read scripture yesterday. I don't have my glasses on at the moment. I'm squinting. Yes, that's Clayton. Clayton, Bill Shilledy, and Carol Bloom. So we were very fortunate to have them as readers. And other clergy were with us in spirit too, that expressed their condolences and couldn't be here, but were thinking of us on that day. So, by the way, I do want to share with you, yesterday we had a very large basket on the altar because we wanted you all to see. It's a rather unique basket. It was sent by Art and Joan Boyd, and it has something in the basket, and it's actually a fishing rod. Can you believe it? And that's because Frank loved fishing in Maine in August, and when he would visit Art and Joan in the Bahamas, he would go fishing with them. And so they said, we're going to put a fishing rod in the bouquet. And they found a florist that would do that. Who knew, right? So you can see that on your way into the fellowship hall later. But our altar flowers today are in honor of Karina's birthday tomorrow. So isn't that nice? So happy birthday in advance. We'll get to wish you that in coffee hour too. So this week we have a copy of the phone and address directory and email directory for the congregation and friends of the congregation who attend. And so it's now on the table in the fellowship hall. And we'd love it if you check your listing and just update anything that you want changed. Maybe you have a favorite email, or you want your cell phone instead of your regular, or vice versa. And you know, this is your chance to make corrections and additions before we print multiple copies for the congregation. And we're just trying to help everyone stay in better touch. We realize that some of our information had grown quite outdated. So take a look at that. After service at about 11:15, we'll gather again, anyone who wishes to, in the choir loft to continue our discussion on inclusive church. And today, we're going to be looking at Bible passages that have often been used in some harmful ways. And so we're going to look at other ways to look at them, set them in their historic context, and maybe open some minds a little bit about what some of the passages mean that maybe have been interpreted differently by many Christians. So it's an interesting study opportunity. We're going to start that a bit today. Last week we spoke about our conference and our denomination and what our history has been with regard to inclusiveness and some of the actions that our conference has taken that have tried to make our conference a place of welcome for all people, and a place where people are treated equally, and that's something that we're always working toward. So, also, we have a couple of dates in the announcements. Peaceworks, Dorothy Saraceno's production, is coming to MUMC, and it's going to be a benefit for the Alternatives to Violence Project. And I'm sure we'll have Dorothy speak about that as it gets closer and tell you more herself, but do save the date and know that it's going to be amazing and inspiring and thought-provoking, just like her last production here, The Unsung Heroines of the Civil Rights Movement, was for all of us. So that's Sunday, September 16th. We're letting you know about is the 22nd at 11 a.m. to celebrate the life of George Coffin here in the sanctuary. Okay? And there'll be lots more coming up, but these are a few that we wanted to have on your radar. Ron and I will be away at a family wedding next weekend, and Clayton will be leading the service, so thank you, Clayton. Okay. And I think we'll move along in our service now. We'll give you a chance to greet one another. Let's pass the peace of Christ to one another.
So, I'm going to just read you a story maybe you've heard about already in the news. When Malala Yousafzai was 11 years old, she began writing about how much she wanted to get an education, even though some people in her native Pakistan thought girls shouldn't go to school. You know that story? You're all in school, right? You like learning? You're smart? Right? Who's smart here? Raise your hand. Oh, yes, okay. What's your favorite subjects? Science. Science. Social studies. Oh, Gina likes all of them. Math. Smart. That's great. So you all have things you like learning in school, right? So, and it makes a difference because you have many more opportunities in your life. And we know girls can do amazing things and women. So, but Malala was outspoken about that, wanted to get an education. And unfortunately, some people didn't like that. That meant change. Some people don't like ways to change that they're used to, even if what's been done is wrong. So it says Malala was threatened many times, but she persisted in writing about her dreams for herself and girls everywhere. When Malala was 15, a man boarded her school bus and shot her, targeting her because of her courage in standing up for girls' rights to go to school. But don't worry, she survived. Okay, so this is a good story because she survived. Even after she was hurt, Malala didn't give up. She is the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner and still works hard in the hope that one day every child will be able to go to school, all while she herself is still in school. And then here's a quote from her. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. So what kind of qualities does she have in her life? What are some of the qualities of her character and her personality? What would you say? What did you learn about her? What kind of person is she? A good person, yeah. She cared about not just herself, but other girls who could go to school and then make a difference in the world with learning. They could become doctors and they could become teachers and many, many things with education, right? What else did we learn about her? Other thoughts? Yeah?
She didn't like what was happening before, as girls weren't allowed to go to school. And I learned it's because the only thing
So she also had persistence, that word that was used earlier. She kept going, even though sometimes there were obstacles in her way. So that's a good quality too, right? And here in church, we talk about qualities that Jesus has. And Jesus, in his life on earth, was very persistent, because he had people that didn't like what he was doing, but he kept going, kept teaching from God and healing people, and he even interacted with people that others didn't think were worth the time. People who were sick or had other issues, and he loved them all, right? So, you guys are great. It's a great book. There's a lot of other women in the book, so we'll look at some others other weeks. But I'm glad I had her here today to share this with, because I thought it would be meaningful to you. So, can you say her name? Malala Yousafzai.
Malala Yousafzai.
Great. I'm going to put this down. Let's have a prayer, and you can go to Sunday school. Dear God, we thank you that you have created both men and women in your image. We all are your children with intelligence and heart and gifts and talents and many things that we can do for you. And we pray for girls around the world to have opportunities, to have, first of all, their basic needs met, food and water and clothing and shelter and love, but also to add to that education and opportunities. And we pray for those who are in school now that they'll understand that this can open many doors for them, and they won't get discouraged and give up, but to keep going, keep learning. And I pray for our girls here today, that all of your dreams for them, oh God, will be realized, that they will also learn much and use their gifts for a better world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks for coming up. Great to see you.
Issue a warning. This morning's scripture is for mature audiences only. 2 Samuel 11, starting at verse 1. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to fetch her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "You have just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live, and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." This is the word of the Lord.
So Ron's right, it is more mature subject matter today, and I just wanted to say that if today's sermon evokes anything in you that you want to talk to me about, if you need to process a little, please feel free. You can make an appointment to talk more or talk after church a bit. So now we're going to turn to number 358, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind, 358, and you may wish to stand. I was sent for by the king, the one that the prophet Samuel had anointed, the man after God's own heart, they called him, the one God chose to lead our people. Naturally, I wondered why I would be called to meet with the king. Me, Uriah's wife. What could he possibly want with little old me? I wasn't used to that. Was it something about my husband? He was a very good warrior, but I couldn't understand it. Was he in trouble of some kind? Had he dishonored my people in some way? I couldn't imagine that he was such a good man. But what could possibly be the reason? But he did. He called me to himself, and then he looked at me searchingly. A small smile pursed his lips, and he asked me to come closer. He asked his servants to bring 2 glasses of wine and then leave. I noticed that we were not in the throne room or a hall, but in a bedchamber. The king had called me to his chamber, a room where sometimes important decisions were made, but also a place of other activity. I have to confess to you, I was frightened. I bowed, Your Majesty. He told me to stand up and then to sit beside him on the bed. He put the wine to my lips and commanded me to drink and tell him what I thought of the best fruit of the vine in the land. What happened next is not something I'm able to talk about. I was shocked. Uriah, I kept thinking of Uriah. Something was terribly wrong. I felt like I was in some kind of a dream. This couldn't be happening. I couldn't deny the king. I might be thrown into prison or executed, but I was a married woman to a good and faithful man that I loved. But then this king, he saw my tears afterward and he said, there, beautiful, you mustn't cry and mar that pretty face of yours. Aren't I treating you right? I saw you on the rooftop bathing, and there's not another woman in Israel so lovely. Now stop crying and know that I'm going to honor you. It's an honor to be appreciated by the king. You're going to be so lucky that I saw you, now that you are one of the king's women. I heard his words, but only vaguely, as I was in pain on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally. He didn't understand this. All he could think of was himself and not how I felt. He called for maidservants to take me to the mineral baths and help me clean up and then put on some lovely new royal clothes of fine cloth. He even offered me food. But I wasn't hungry. I sit with him while he talked to me further. Finally, I was commanded to put on my original clothes and return to Uriah, not to breathe a word about this time.
or I would be taken by the guards and killed. Trembling, I promised not to talk about it. I went home with the dreaded secret. What the king called good and an honor, I called wrong. I felt dirty and used. I was shaking like a leaf. I didn't know how I would explain the shaking to Uriah. I resolved to tell him that I was just coming down with a fever, and he, caring man that he was, told me to lie down and sleep early, and he didn't want me to prepare his meal. He would just have a little cheese and bread. I did not have the word rape in my vocabulary or abuse. I do remember forming the words, "Please stop," but the air barely passed through my lips. This was the king. I was afraid to speak against him. I did know what had happened had harmed me and Uriah and changed our household forever. I didn't even dream how much, though. I didn't know what would come next. It got worse. But I had trouble sleeping. I prayed to God, and I prayed that God would heal my pain. I would have to make excuses to not be with Uriah for a bit. I just couldn't. I prayed that God would forgive me for bathing on the roof where I might be seen. It was so warm in our home, and the breeze felt good, and I didn't really think anyone could see me. But the king from the palace saw more than I intended. I prayed that I would be forgiven for having relations when I was still unclean from my cycle, and with a man other than my husband. I prayed and I cried, muffling my sobs as much as I could. We did not have a maidservant. We were very poor, or I would have perhaps confided in her. But then that might not have been a good idea either, as she might have told someone. And who knows, the king might have sent his guards to capture me and punish me in some way. Well, not long after, Uriah told me he was being called to the battlefield. He'd gotten a letter from the king. He told me he had to serve our wonderful king and do what King David told him to do. So he obeyed, and I was left alone. It was apparent to me that the king wanted him out of the way, at least away from me, so he could send for me again. But even I never suspected how dastardly his actions would be. When I heard later that my husband was sent to the very front of the battle, the most dangerous place, and before long I was notified that he had been killed, and I heard rumors that no one even tried to protect him by the king's own orders. Before long, I had to tell King David that I was pregnant, too. And I started getting sick every morning. I couldn't believe that this king who loved God so much that he danced before the Lord had now chosen a different dance with me, destroyed my family, and now I was carrying his child. I couldn't believe that my husband, whom I loved so much, was killed because of this man that had strayed so far from the God that he so loved. It made no sense to me, but I guess everyone's human. Now, some women would have jumped at the chance to bear an heir to the king, but I did truly love Uriah, and I would have traded all that sorrow for my old life of poverty. But God saw. Let me tell you, friends, God did see my suffering. God did care for me as God cares for every soul. God saw my suffering like that of Hagar long ago, sent away by Abraham and Sarah. God looks on the brokenhearted. I believe that. I know that. I've experienced it. And God saw that even his chosen leaders can do wrong. And King David had his own sorrow before long. When that child that I bore him died, we both grieved, actually, because it was a life. I felt a little more numb and disconnected to the child because of how I was impregnated. But still, King David consoled me because I was in such sorrow in general in this whole time in my life. And he assumed it was because the heir had died. He didn't know that I was also grieving for Uriah. #MeToo applies so well to me. Me, Bathsheba. Look what happened when this powerful man decided that he wanted me. when he lusted after me. Look how it destroyed my life and my husband's life. Did he realize the damage that he had done? Did he really realize it? You know, so many people portray me as a loose woman. They assume that because I was out bathing on the roof that I must have been some sort of temptress, but no, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I was a faithful woman, a woman of God. But even my compliance and silence didn't protect me from this man's power. You see how terrible this lusty king's action was, how he misused his influence and power. This happens more often than one would care to realize. I know he had been a powerful warrior and killed so many. I know that that was probably stressful for him. And I know also that many people praised him for being a great warrior. Maybe it went to his head. Maybe he was fatigued from battle. Maybe with his army being away from him and it being springtime, he was just being very, very human. I understand that. But it was wrong. The prophet Nathan set him straight. He told him a story about a poor man whose only lamb is taken by a rich man to prepare for a guest. And when King David was outraged at the rich man in this story, Nathan said, "You are that man." Finally, he got it. Finally, he realized what he had done to Uriah. But of course, I don't really want to be compared to a lamb. I'm a person. Back in my day, women were not treated equally, and they were seen as property and possessions. I understand you all have come a long way, but there's more to come, more progress to be made. But we have to do it together. We have to make sure that anyone with the hashtag of #MeToo is listened to. We have to make sure that people know that they can't use their power and influence for greedy, selfish, and destructive purposes. People have to be seen as souls and not as objects. It's very, very important. Of course, the God I serve and you serve is gracious. And later, I had another son who lived, Solomon, and he went on to be very wise, and you still have his wisdom in your book of Proverbs. And King David was forgiven by God. Even this treacherous king had God's grace and forgiveness. That's what a wonderful God we serve. But it doesn't mean what he did was right. And we need to remember that even the most wonderful people who love God can fall far. And that means every one of us can be tempted and fall from grace. So let us keep watch on all of ourselves as we try to live God's way and learn from the mistakes of this king. And let us look out for those who are like me, Bathsheba, and need comfort and healing because they have been treated wrongly. May God be with you as you continue to work for equality of all people and for the right of all people to be treated with dignity and respected as children of God. Thank you. So Emily's going to sing in Hebrew for us again as we take up our offering. Now let us be prayerful as we make our offerings for our work together.
Thank you.